Test 1, 2.
Members, good evening. Before the meeting does formally begin, in keeping with the framework I've applied to our blessings, we're going to start with prayers tonight from Dr. Abdul Karim Khalil of the West London Islamic Centre. Dr. Khalil, it's all yours.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Thank you, your Lord Mayor, for this invitation. And if I may, I would like to start by actually inviting all of you to our annual community iftar, which will be on the 27th of March at 6:30. This is an event which we do every year in Ramadan, which will start in about 7 days' time. And I really hope that all of you will join us to share the experience of breaking the fast together in Ramadan and mix with the community. So that's at 6:30 on the 27th of March. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the universe. In a week's time, nearly 25% of the world population will embark on a 1-month-long journey of fasting. Now, abstaining from food, drink, and sexual activities during the day are very common aspects of fasting. But the deeper purpose of fasting is striving to achieve God consciousness and God fearing. It's called taqwa in Arabic. Allah says in Al-Quran, O believers, fasting is prescribed for you as it was for those before you. So perhaps you will become mindful of Allah. This verse is a reminder that most, if not all, faiths endorse and enjoy fasting in some form or another, and for the same basic, deeper purpose, which is to make us better persons. Yet, when we look around us, we sadly see so much human suffering, be it fear, be it hunger, being rising levels of anxiety, stress, suicide, drug abuse, etc. And in spite of our claim that we all uphold the sanctity of the human life, we seem to be not caring enough about each other's lives. God says in Al-Quran, whosoever takes a life, unless as a punishment of murder or mischief in the land, it will be as if they killed all humanity. And whosoever saves a life, it will be as if they have saved all of humanity. We may argue about what is or is not justifiable taking away of a life, but one would hope and pray that we would all agree that the taking away of the life of the defenseless, elderly, ill, and most certainly the child just cannot be right. Now, fasting is a time for us to reflect on all these aspects. It's a time to reconnect with our Creator and seek reconciliation with Him, to rise above the worldly desires and aspire to become better human beings. May Allah guide us all to what's best in this life and in the hereafter. May Allah guide our council to do what's best for the residents of Ealing. And I want to finish with a special prayer for our King. اللهم رب الناس أذهب البأس عن الملك تشارلز واشفه أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاؤك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. Oh Allah, oh Allah, oh Allah, look of our King and save him from any illness and grant him speedy and full recovery. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khalil, for providing the blessing and prayers tonight. As colleagues, as Dr. Khalil explained, West London Islamic Centre is one of the largest mosques in the borough and is preparing for Ramadan. I think starts this weekend, and of course, he's just invited everybody to a community iftar on the 27th of March. 6:30 as well. So, Doctor, you're welcome to stay for the meeting if you wish. It will probably finish about 9:30, but you can stay for however long you want to. Thank you very much. Right, members, let's formally begin the meeting now. We're leaving already. So, welcome members, officers, and to people in the public gallery. And to everyone who's watching on YouTube tonight, to the council meeting to consider the annual budget strategy. So those watching online, I'm Councillor Tesh Taylor, Mayor of Ealing, and to those who, I've lost my track. So first, some housekeeping. To my left is not the Chief Executive again today. It's in his place is Emily Hill, who's our Strategic Director for Resources. To my right, as usual, is Sam Bailey, Democratic Services, and our Head of Legal Democratic Services, Helen, is also back tonight as well for any legal or constitutional advice. I do need to stress this meeting, we do need to make sure we do finish this meeting and get decisions made. Otherwise, Emily's going to be in trouble. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the main proceedings. Tonight's meeting will be broadcast live and record and retain on the council's YouTube site. And therefore, I presume everyone consents to this happening. If you don't consent to this, then you should leave the meeting now. I think someone's just come back. There are a number of councillors, are they joining us? Yeah, who will be joining us remotely tonight via Zoom. And these members will not be counted as formally being in attendance at the meeting for the purposes of Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. However, the virtual attendance will be recorded in the minutes under item 1. And those members in attendance virtually will be able to speak at the meeting, but won't be able to take part in any of the votes. So, on to item 1. That's apologies for absence and attendance. Sam, are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, I've received apologies from councillors Alexander, Jasbir Anand, Khan, Pada and Dinza.
Thank you. He's got that. He got one. He'd say that, yeah. Okay. And are there any councillors present virtually tonight?
Yes, I have Councillor Josh Blacker present virtually.
Okay, great. On to item 2, it is any declarations of interests to be made. I'll take that as a no. Item 3, which is the minutes of the main meeting that was held on 19th of December 2023. Are those minutes agreed? Thank you. Item 4, which is minutes of the meeting held on 21st of February 24. Are those minutes agreed? Thank you. On to Mayor's announcements. I'll try and speed through these. So last weekend, together with the leader, we attended the Ukrainian Catholic Church in London to commemorate the 2nd anniversary of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Also attended the 647th Parkesh Parab at the Sri Ravidas Guru Temple in Southall with several Southall councillors. Last week, we attended the institution induction of the new rector at St Nicholas Church in Perivale with local ward councillors from Perivale and James Murray. On Sunday, This one for you. I visited Gunnersbury Park to meet young members of Brentford Penguins. There's a football club for young people with Down syndrome, so it's worth supporting that. As you've heard, Ramadan begins this weekend, and there'll be a couple of community iftars to which councillors will be invited in due course. I thank those members who have obviously continued to give generously, and in return for refreshments tonight, including vegan, cheer, and gluten-free, and samosas. I reminded members of the following. So on Sunday, I'm doing the walk. So sponsorship is more than welcome. And also, I'm reminded that the mayoral fundraiser that's next Wednesday as well. Haweli's restaurant down the road in Ealing as well. So please purchase your tickets tonight while you're enjoying those refreshments. So tickets have been bought tonight as well. So thanks as always to all those past mayors who've covered any additional official mayoral invited events, and also for covering the citizenship ceremonies. So on to the main business now. Item 6, which is petitions from members of the public. We don't have any petitions from members of the public. Petitions from members of the council. We have no petitions from members of the council. Questions from members of the public. We don't have any questions from members of the public tonight. So we're now on to item 9, which is questions from members of the council. And the order of questions I have here is the first one is from Councillor Blacklini, to Councillor Newstub.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder give an update on progress on Gurnell Leisure Centre, please?
Thank you so much, Councillor Baclini, for your question. We have committed to deliver a new state-of-the-art leisure facility at Gurnell. And in February 2023, Cabinet approved the principle of bringing forward a new leisure centre. It is envisaged as a hub for the community, providing a place for people of all ages to exercise, relax and socialise. This will mean a new leisure centre with a 50-metre pool and an improved gym. I know how loved Gurnell was by all ages, and that's why there'll be a range of facilities, including a climbing wall, soft play areas, meeting and party rooms and a new cafe. The latest update on the project is that in that February 2024, we approved the procurement and delivery strategy for the project, and it agreed it should move to the next phase of the design development. And tonight, I would like to celebrate that our planning application is due to be submitted shortly and that a new leisure centre is well on the way.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary question from the Labour Group? No?
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. Can the portfolio holder update us of the work Ealing Council are doing to engage with residents?
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Kelly, for your question. Last week, I attended pop-ups across Ealing to share the new plans for Gurnell with residents, as well-attended event, Meet the Architect events right here in this very room. We've been holding meetings at Northolt, Dormerswell and Acton leisure centres. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk to so many residents and get their feedbacks on the plans, and they are really excited. And the feedback so far has been really positive. I encourage all residents to share their views on the Give My View section of our website. We've also been doing, aside from that consultation, a lot of work to engage and connect with residents on other council-wide issues, particularly through the Your Voice, Your Town engagement. Between July and November last year, 32 engagement activities took place across the borough, enabling participants to share their perspectives and experience on civic involvement and how they believed it could be delivered better in the future. This included local councillors, residents, education institutions, volunteer community, faith sector and council services. And it's meant we've been able to talk to them about how they want to engage with the council more widely. Looking ahead, we're really looking forward to holding workshops in each of the 7 towns in May, when local people will be invited to hear the feedback from the process so far, see what their neighbours said about their ambitions for their area, and agree a model for going forward that best meets their need.
Thank you. Before we go to the second question, I just want to say welcome back to Councillor Hashani. Welcome back to council. So next question is from Councillor Malcolm to Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the portfolio holder please outline how much the total changes were in 2023 to Southall Square and how much of that money came from the council?
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm, for the question. 80% of the cost of the Southall Square changes was covered by the Mayor's Build Back Greener Fund, and 20% of it was covered by the UK Government's Shared Prosperity Fund. So overall, 100% of the cost came in external funding, which I think is real testament to how great the council is at maximising the money that we can spend on green projects, even in these really difficult times. Now, I think the Liberal Democrats already know this because we did publicise it in around Ealing earlier last year. So it will be well known. I can only imagine that Councillor Malcolm was hoping to come back with a clever supplementary question, asking if perhaps we thought this was value for money. But since it didn't cost us a penny, then I would say it's definitely value for money. But just to let people know the changes that we've made in Southall Square, we have basically removed some of the paving, and instead we have got what's called sustainable urban drainage put in place. Now, this means that where we had surface water issues in the past, we can now watch that drain away into green planted areas, and we've also got additional trees and granite seating benches for people to sit on in Southall. The planting was put in place in November, and we had great help from some of the pupils at Villiers School Gardening Club, some of them whom myself and the leader met just the other day when we called around to see their new school streets in progress. That planting, and we hope will come and bloom in the spring and in the summer, and we will see the parklet in its full glory. And I think it's a great example of the new approach that we've taken to our streets, where we want to take away some of the unnecessary concrete and greyness of Ealing Street, so that instead people in Southall can enjoy sitting on the benches surrounded by a small oasis of nature in the middle of one of our 7 towns.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary question?
Thank you. A couple of residents approached me who live near the location and mentioned that some of the work there was rather small scale. Some of the paving that has turned into stonework, hardly the mini oasis that you said to around Ealing a number of months ago. So can you tell me how you will measure how these changes are going to help climate change?
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. I think I did say a mini oasis. I'm not making claims for anything more than that. But what this is part of a new approach that we're taking across the borough. It's just one example of how we're hoping to change the face of Ealing streets. Southall is one place that we have done this, but you will increasingly see on a corner of a street near you, pavements replaced by trees and by wildflowers and other planting. And we need to do this if we're going to take action on the serious flood risk that increasingly threatens both London as a whole and Ealing. And as a council, we're not going to just sit back and let that happen. We're taking proactive action to make sure that the surface water that comes through the increasingly heavy rain that we see at times of the year when previously we didn't see so much rain, that rain, which cannot be accommodated in the Victorian drains that we still have in London, and there is no funding to improve those Victorian drains, that rain can go into the earth, can go down into the soil rather than stay on tarmac or on cement in Ealing. So I think this is a great example of work we are doing far more widely across the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Costigan. Next up is Councillor Conti to Councillor Monroe.
Thank you. How will Sill be sliced, and by what measure will it be awarded to Ealing's 7 town forums?
Thank you, Councillor Conti.
as you were there at the last meeting, you will be already aware, since you paid careful attention during the last full council meeting, we are currently consulting on the public on the draft community infrastructure levy charging schedule, which is due to end on the 10th of April. This is just the first step in introducing SEAL, as we look to ensure that the funds are directed to projects that matter most to our local communities. We were also very clear in the manifesto where, if you'd read it, we set out the ambition to raise £12 million through this developer tax. And in the council plan, where we have committed to setting aside 2 million of the money raised through SEAL for town forums. Through developing the infrastructure delivery plan, we know what projects we need to spend money on and where those projects are set to take place. Once we have SEAL implemented, that is, if you don't keep on refusing all the applications, there is some money in the pot. We'll be able to allocate the right amount of money for our communities to spend on the projects that matter to them. In the meanwhile, we're continuing the important work on ensuring that our residents are right at the heart of making decisions about where they live. We engaged with almost 1,000 residents through the engagement we did last summer, and we're hard at work using the knowledge we gathered to continue to work openly with our residents and communities to set out how we can give them the tools and authority to shape and mold their towns for the better with this money.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary question from the Tory?
Yeah, thank you. Given last year we were told at full council that town forums would start in December 2023, when can we expect all 7 town forums to have had their first meeting?
Councillor Conti, that's not my portfolio, so I have not got that information currently, so we'll have to come back to you.
Okay, all right. Next up, I've got Councillor Hamidi to Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you. Can the portfolio holder provide an update on what the council is doing to support homeless households and rough sleepers in our borough?
Thank you, Councillor Hamidi, for the question on an incredibly important subject. And just like other local authorities across London and the UK, Ealing continues to do its very best to help residents facing homelessness or sleeping on the streets. And I'm delighted to say that we are one of the best performing boroughs in the whole of London and the country. One of the most important aspects of that, which is to prevent homelessness from occurring in the first place. Of the 2,600 homelessness applications that we've taken just in the last 12 months, the team have done an amazing job helping prevent over half of them through early intervention. In addition to that, of course, at the last cabinet meeting, we took the incredibly important decision to allocate £150 million of funding to purchase properties for use as temporary accommodation in an effort to house some of our most vulnerable residents and reduce our resilience on expensive hotel accommodation that costs the councils millions of pounds a year. We've seen almost 1,700 people present to the council as homeless just through the end of private tenancies over the last year alone, something that the Tory government keep on promising that they're going to end in terms of no fault evictions, and every time they have the opportunity they bottle it. But what that means is that we are seeing private rented residents coming to our doorsteps day after day after day after having been evicted for the first time in their lifetimes. And we're also seeing private rents remain at crazy high levels as supply continues to dwindle, whilst London councils estimate the sector has shrunk by almost 50%. We've also been working hard to help those sleeping on our streets, and of the 105 rough sleepers that the council supported with emergency accommodation, we've successfully moved 60 of them to alternative housing options, including in the private sector, supported living, and with social housing options. That's 60 residents who have been given critical support when they've needed it the most, giving them a safe and secure place to live, providing them with a fresh start to rebuild their lives. But the challenge that we and other councils across the country face is immense, with more and more people presenting as homeless every single day, at a time where house prices and private rents continue to reach sky-high levels in Ealing. Labour are taking real action to provide those who need it safe and secure accommodation.
Thank you. Is anybody else from the Labour Group have a supplementary? Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the portfolio holder share my concern about the continuous lack of action from the Tory government to try and tackle the homelessness crisis in the UK?
A big resounding yes, Councillor Weston, absolutely. How could anyone not be concerned about the homelessness crisis that this country has been led into by an uncaring, incompetent failure of an excuse of a Tory government? The figures surrounding homelessness only seem to grow in the wrong direction year after year. 136,000 young people currently homeless in the UK. Rough sleeping has gone up by 23% in the last year. Private rented sector properties supply has gone down by over 40% in the last few years. In Ealing, we have thousands of people on our waiting list and thousands more in temporary accommodation. A few years ago, we had almost eradicated the use of bed and breakfasts as temporary accommodation. Sadly, in 2024, we've got hundreds of people placed in hotels, with more and more coming to us every day, with us having no alternatives but to place them there. People across the UK are finding themselves turfed out by landlords as they pump up the rent or leave the market altogether after the Tories' harebrained economic experiments sent interest rates to their highest levels in years and creating an inflationary crisis that this country is yet to recover from. And who have we got at the helm? An unelected Prime Minister who is entirely detached from the realities that millions of people in this country struggle with every single day. The realities that us as Labour councillors in this room hear and see and read day in, day out. Those families who are absolutely distraught by the situation that's been created by this government. And that's why, Mr. Mayor, we need a general election and why we need a Labour government, one dedicated to delivering 1.5 million new homes for a generation that have been frozen out of the housing market by 14 years of Tory misrule. Mr. Mayor, so that people in Ealing, in London and across the UK can have safe, secure and affordable places that they can call home.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Martin to Councillor Blacker, who is online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder give an update on the work that the council is doing to address health challenges in the borough and the recent grant that we have received that will support this?
Thanks, Councillor Martin, and apologies, I can't be there to support the budget this evening. I'm very proud to share the significant strides the council's made in addressing health challenges in our borough. Our approach is comprehensive and holistic. In Ealing, we recognise that health is intertwined with various aspects of life. That's why we've been working tirelessly across all council directorates to enhance residents' wellbeing. From education to employment, housing to community spaces, we're committed to reducing inequalities and ensuring that everyone can thrive. We've undertaken extensive efforts which will be detailed in our upcoming annual Health of the Borough report. So a few noteworthy examples as a preview. We've empowered council tenants and leaseholders to shape services and take control over their own homes, an initiative aimed at fostering a sense of ownership and community engagement. In Northolt, we've worked hand in hand with 300 individuals to develop a community-led vision for enhancing local spaces, amplifying the voices of our residents, the environment they live in that in turn shapes their lives. And during the harsh winter months, we allocated 33 grants to community and voluntary organisations to provide warm spaces, offering vital support to those in need during challenging times. We are working through the action plan to implement Ealing's health and wellbeing strategy, which will elevate wellbeing and reduce disparities by strengthening the building blocks of health for every individual. Just recently, we co-produced a suicide prevention action plan with residents who bravely shared their lived experiences alongside valued local community and voluntary partners, demonstrating our commitment to actively listening to our residents and directly addressing their needs with them. As evident from those efforts, we are making significant progress. And I am so happy that we were granted £5 million from the National Institute of Health Research, which will bolster our ongoing efforts to tackle health inequalities and further improve outcomes in our borough. Working closely with local community organisations and research institutions, we'll embark on a journey of learning to promote healthier, thriving and more equitable communities over the next 5 years. Even in the face of setback by the Tories' cuts, we remain resolute in our mission to prioritise the health and wellbeing of every resident in our borough.
Thank you, councillor Blacker. Is there a supplementary from the Labour Group? Supplementary question, that is. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the portfolio holder share my concern that after 14 years, the Conservative government has failed to tackle health inequality?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I absolutely do. It is time to confront a harsh reality. The Tories have not only failed, but have miserably neglected to address the critical issue of health inequalities and have left our NHS in a perilous state. For too long, the Tories have turned a blind eye to the suffering of our most vulnerable. They have let health inequalities fester and grow, allowing it to become a shameful hallmark of their governance. While they may have touted policies as solutions, the reality tells a very different story, a story of broken promises and shattered dreams. And let's not forget the egregious decision to abolish Public Health England without so much as a strategic replacement, and its replacement had an 85% cut to its budget. It's a move that reeks of incompetence and negligence, leaving us all vulnerable to the whims of fate. It's not just a disappointment. It's a travesty, a betrayal of the trust voters had placed in those elected to lead. Any government worth its salt would prioritise prevention, placing it front and centre of its agenda. But what have we seen from the Tories? Nothing but empty promises and hollow rhetoric. They failed to address health inequalities, let alone implement a cohesive plan for health. For example, Black women are still 4 times more likely to die while pregnant, giving birth, or as new mothers than their white counterparts. Despite clear evidence of this alarming disparity, the Tories have failed to implement targeted measures to address the underlying structural inequalities that contribute to this crisis. The time for complacency is over. We cannot afford to sit back and watch as our health and well-being is sacrificed on the altar of political expediency. It's time to hold the Tories to account for their failures and demand real, meaningful change. Only a Labour government can build a fairer Britain, a Britain where every individual, regardless of their background or circumstance, has access to quality healthcare.
Thank you, councillor Blacker. So we're back in the room. So councillor Ball, you're next to councillor Munro.
Yes, thank you. When will the council publish the responses to the public consultation on the proposed Northfields Conservation Area?
Thank you, councillor Ball, for your question. As you're aware, the team are currently working round the clock on the recent launch of both the Regulation 19 consultation and the consultation on the Community Infrastructure Levy charging schedule. We're currently in the process of increasing the capacity of the team with the current plan to have the urban design team, which will also include a conservation officer, in place in the summer of this year. With this additional resource, the team will be in a better position to process the consultation results for the proposed Northfields Conservation Area, hopefully later this year.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary?
Yes, please. Disappointed that it'll take quite so long, but if the result of the consultation, when it does come out, is to proceed with a new conservation area, can the portfolio holder set out how the council will consult widely and fairly on any potential Article 4 direction for the new conservation area, including a public vote on that?
Are you in favour, councillor Ball, or not? But look, councillor Ball, I'm also waiting for the consultation results to come. When they come, we will review them and then we will find a way forward. Do you expect me to actually have a view before the consultation, in which case you will argue that the consultation shouldn't have been taken place? So I'm waiting for those results as well. When they come through, we will then go through them and make a proper decision around how we move forward. And yes, we will consult widely whichever way we go, but we will have to do that, and that's the normal process. So I don't understand why you've asked the question.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Last question is from Councillor Haley to Councillor Kanaljit Nagpal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder provide an update on the performance of schools in Ealing at the moment?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Haley. I am thrilled to share the remarkable achievements of our schools. Currently, Ealing stands proudly with 98% of our schools rated good or outstanding by Ofsted, surpassing the national average by a substantial margin of 7% and placing Ealing amongst the top 10 local authorities in the entire country. I'm particularly proud to highlight the transformational journey of many of our schools, moving from requires improvement grading to achieving good or outstanding. Just a few years ago, Harbain Primary School was struggling to meet the expected standards and achieved a grading of requiring improvement. And now they've done exceptionally well through collaborative efforts, targeted interventions. Harbain Primary School has now emerged as a shining example of excellence, earning a good rating from Ofsted. And I must say, I could give lots of examples like that. Our academic outcomes in Ealing continue to surpass national averages across key stages 2, 4 and post-16 education. Ealing secondary schools proudly retain their position in first place in the country for the Progress 8 measure, showcasing the exceptional progress our students make from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 4. Every single secondary school in Ealing is graded as good or outstanding by Ofsted, which takes us 19.6% above the national average. Our secondary schools are not just excelling, but are setting the standard for excellence across the country. Alongside our secondary schools, our special schools have also achieved remarkable success, with 100% graded as good or outstanding and surpassing the national average by a whopping 11%. Our pupil referral units, catering to some of our most vulnerable students, have also achieved a perfect record as they were graded as good or outstanding. These statistics are not just numbers on a page. They are stories of triumph and dedication, a reflection of our transformative impact and the commitment and dedication of Ealing schools.
Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. Is there a supplementary question from the Labour Group? Anyone? Councillor Raza?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Many councils across the UK have pledged to lobby the government over funding for special educational needs and disabilities. So can the portfolio holder share how Ealing is mitigating the government's failure in delivering for SEND pupils?
Thank you, Councillor Raza. The national demand for education, health and care plans has skyrocketed. The Tories have failed to keep funding for high needs provision at pace with the growing demand. They themselves have admitted that the system is faltering, and yet our local authorities are forced to grapple with insufficient resources and mounting financial pressure. We stand at a critical juncture where we must confront a harsh reality. It's a reality that speaks to the very core of our values as a society, particularly in how we support some of our most vulnerable members, children with special educational needs and disabilities. Reflecting on the past decade, it's evident that the system designed to cater to these children is in a state of crisis. Almost 14 years ago, the Tories made promises of empowerment and assurances to local authorities and parents. Yet what's actually transpired is a distressing narrative of unmet promises, bureaucratic hurdles, and a shortage of essential resources. Families find themselves embroiled in battles for resources, long waits for crucial assessments, delays in issuing vital documents outlining children's entitlements, and a chronic shortage of placements and support. Despite these hurdles, in the last year in Ealing, we've provided 78 additional places with children with SEND, with more planned. We've increased the number of specialist placements across the borough through school expansions. We've launched our Ealing Additional Needs SEND and Inclusion Strategy, which is currently being implemented. However, like all local authorities in the UK, Ealing does not have enough. The burden placed on local authorities is untenable, and the consequences of this chronic underfunding are stark. There cannot be any further cuts or delays. I urge the government to heed the calls of local authorities for increased funding for SEND provision and to stop failing our children with SEND.
Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. That is the end of questions from members of the council. So well done. We're going to go into the main item now, which is item 10, which is the 2024-25 budget strategy. I just want to point out that the just to point out, we've got 25 speakers, and the main ones from the from Councillor Donnelly and the opposition groups will get 8 minutes each, and everybody else has got 3 minutes. So, given there's 25 speakers, you need to think about making sure your colleagues can get in. So, can I call upon Councillor Donnelly to move the 24-25 budget strategy, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proud to move this administration's budget proposals for 24-25, the third budget I've had the honour of moving, and I look forward to hearing a lively and interesting debate this evening. First, as is right and traditional, I'd like to thank Emily Hill, who's beside you this evening, her finance team, and indeed officers from all across the council who've worked hard to put this budget together. It's no mean feat to pull together so much complex information in a way that enables informed decision making, and the quality of the work here should be commended. Once upon a time, Mr. Mayor, the balancing of budgets in local government was not a drama, let alone a crisis. Not so in 2024. Today, councils up and down the country of all political persuasions and none are announcing that for them, the numbers don't add up, and they can no longer defy the gravitational pull of a decade and a half of worsening institutional underfunding. We've all had to deal with a damaged economy caused by the mismanagement and fiscal ineptitude of successive Tory governments, and local government today faces its most serious budgetary crisis in memory. And I've got quite a long memory. Last week, we heard that 19 councils across the country of all sizes and politics had sought financial support from the government. In response, the government merely allowed those councils to incur a potential further £2 billion worth of debt at a higher rate of interest, like going to the bank manager for help only to be referred on to a loan shark. Here in Ealing, we're not immune to these pressures. Since 2014, the funding we get from government has fallen in real terms by 56%. The spiralling costs of social care for both adults and children, together with the accelerating government-funded crisis in homelessness and the need for temporary accommodation, means we're having to do so much more with less and less money. However, our proud record of managing our finances with care and prudence means that tonight members are being asked to endorse not just a balanced budget, but one that will support the administration's vision of a supported, connected community, with our residents empowered to make the decisions that matter to their lives. A budget which provides £46 million of direct revenue investment that supports the administration's key priorities: creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, fighting inequality, continuing to provide budget growth in the services that experience significant and continued demand and market pressures, and prioritisation always being given to the most vulnerable in our community. Incredibly, as I stand here tonight, the full scope and extent of this year's local government finance settlement is not known until the Chancellor of the Exchequer speaks tomorrow to confirm which budget leaks were true and which merely self-generated speculation. Until then, we won't know if the Household Support Fund will be extended or abolished, leaving councils, their partners and residents in limbo. The funds provided a lifeline for our most vulnerable residents, and now is not the time to scale back support. Similarly, we still don't know if our share of the last-minute additions to the financial settlement, colleagues may recall, 500 or 600 million pounds that suddenly appeared from nowhere in January, a response, it appears, to the screams of pain of Tory council and the howls of alarm of Tory MPs in marginal constituencies, i.e. most of them. We still don't know if that additional funding represents a one-off payment for 2024-25 or will be money that will carry forward into future years. Truly, central government mismanagement of local government finance has travelled way past the point of shambles into the realms of national scandal. Once again, the government's figures for council core spending power presume the maximum permitted increase in council tax, shifting the balance of local government finance still further towards a regressive and outdated tax. But as a responsible administration committed to sound financial planning, we believe we have no choice but to propose tonight a council tax increase the government has demanded of us, a 2.99% increase in council tax, together with a social care precept of 2%. While we've no wish to add unnecessarily to the costs faced by residents, we have no choice as a financially responsible council but to take these increases. But our outstanding council tax support scheme will continue to be available to support some 10,000 working age households across the borough. But despite the challenges we face, we're determined to propose a budget that builds on our achievements and advances the commitments we've made to the people of Ealing in 2022. I'm proud to say that we're a living wage employer and we now pay our apprentices the real living wage. We've enabled more people to reduce their environmental impact and fight the climate crisis by having generous provision of electric vehicle charging points that continues to expand. And despite a decade of funding reductions, we're on track to deliver ambitious plans, as we've heard earlier, for a new leisure centre at Gurnell and a groundbreaking new regional park for the borough. We'll empower more of our residents using our social care, expanding the use of direct payments. Residents able to do the things they want to do rather than the things we think should be done by them. For nearly 15 years, councils like Ealing have fought to support the people of this country in the face of indifference, incompetence, and even corruption of the Tory government in Westminster. I hope that when we assemble a year from now, the country will have a government that works with councils and not against their interests. In the end, the only change that will give the people of Ealing, the people of this country, the services on which they depend is a new government, a Labour government, and that just can't come soon enough. Mr. Mayor, I move this budget strategy paper together with all of the recommendations contained therein.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. I've got Councillor Mason to move.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I formally second the budget and reserve my right to speak later in the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Busuttil is going to move an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure once again to present the Liberal Democrat amendment to the council budget strategy. We think it will enhance the budget that we are debating this evening. I expect they'll be fairly considered by all councillors ahead of votes later on. I know how much you value hearing from opposition voices. This is an opportunity to work in a consensual way to deliver what local people want. If councillors from all political stripes are truly willing to consider different credible offers on the table. The best way to make the budget package better is through considered amendments, which is what the Liberal Democrat group have produced. I'd like to thank Emily, Kevin and their team and various other officers for the time they have given to work with the Liberal Democrat group to ensure that our amendment is balanced and realistic. Liberal Democrats recognise the challenging financial situation that all local authorities face. This is down to a combination of factors: chronic underfunding of local authorities by central government, the fallout from the shambolic Brexit, Brexit proposed by the Tories and enabled by Labour, which has adversely affected every sector, and Tory economic mismanagement. In some respects, the council has been fortunate that a windfall from borrowed money sat in the bank at high interest rates has, in an odd way, prevented the council from making much deeper cuts to frontline services. We recognise hard decisions need to be made, but we believe that as a service-based organisation, Ealing Council must make every effort to ensure the priorities of our residents are at the forefront of all that we do. Liberal Democrats are proposing a package of reasonable, costed and practical measures to enhance the 2024-25 budget. Our amendment seeks to ensure our streets are cleaner by offering additional funding to street cleaning, particularly tackling fly tipping, especially in worst-known areas of the borough. Our amendment seeks to enhance our climate action and sustainability policy by cutting the printing budget and to discourage the use of paper, decrease car usage by introducing a flat rate 200 parking permit for households with 3 cars or more, and the creation of a Go Green scheme that encourages local businesses to work towards net zero goals. Our amendment seeks to ensure that the Borough of Ealing is safer by employing a neighbourhood liaison officer dedicated in bringing various stakeholders together, holistically tackling problems within neighbourhoods such as crime and antisocial behaviour. Ealing Liberal Democrats have created a package that will ensure Ealing will be cleaner, greener, safer, that residents will be listened to. The Liberal Democrats strongly believe if residents are being asked to pay more than ever in council tax, the concerns that they have about our borough and the improvements that they want to see must be fulfilled. Our proposals represent a positive contribution to the council budget that reflects the wishes of local residents, and I truly hope you support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Before I go to Councillor Malcolm, just say Councillor Kingston, I'll bring you in after Councillor Malcolm because I forgot you to. So Councillor Malcolm, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the amendment from Councillor Basuto, and I also echo his thanks to Emily and the whole financial team and the many other officers around the council over the past few months for their briefings and assessments and alternative proposals. Despite the continually poor level and quality of the Tory government, there is still much we can do with our money to make improvements and provide better services. And Councillor Basuto has pointed the way in his amendment. So first of all, efficiency. So there are many agency and contract staff where some of those savings can be made, and we've shown we can make those savings now. But in the future, we need to have a better strategy for dealing with that area because there are more savings in future years that we can make. Also, we've got the element of community. So I think a couple of weeks ago when I was at a meeting in West Ealing, Councillor Manro and Councillor Newstub answered for probably diligently for over an hour, I think I'd have to say, if I'm honest. They answered nearly every question that residents faced to them. But it was clear, actually, that many areas of the council didn't speak to each other as much as they needed. There needed to be more of a strategy for West Ealing in that sort of area. And part of what the Lib Dems have done here is we've created a neighbourhood liaison officer whose role will be to take on board what residents think in a particular area, that could be West Ealing or others, but also make sure that the different elements of the council are joined together so that those individual officers are talking to each other in a slightly more informed way than we feel they are at the moment. And some of those problems would have been avoided if this sort of role was in there earlier. Also, in terms of community, we've had 3 or 4 years since COVID where many people have lost their voices because of a lack of a ward forum. And although we're promised town forums, that seems a distant memory of when that might appear. And so what the Lib Dems have done here in our amendment, we've found monies to enable small schemes for wards so that councillors, community groups can make improvements in their own areas while they're not listened to as much as they should be. And a ward forum is a way to do that, to supplement either before town forums exist or in addition to those. Councillor Basuto went on to talk about some environmental practical steps that we can take. So one of them he didn't mention was about reducing some of the internal printing. You can reduce quite a lot of that actually, and we've been quite conservative with a small c in this area, where people can still get paper surveys for those who need it, for those that we have to do that, but also more can move online. And I know the council has done that, but it needs to do a bit more on that front, and it can save quite a lot of paper printing. In terms of helping the vulnerable, which I know Councillor Mahfouz mentions quite a lot, and quite rightfully, the Tory government have meant there are so many people who are homeless who weren't homeless, or so many people who have to choose how they can spend their weekly budgets a lot tighter than they ever have done. And so last year, I remember we moved an amendment where there was, I think, £250,000 would go to a vulnerable fund for the welfare assistance, and the Labour Party turned that down,
Sorry,
which is a
Councillor Malcolm,
shame.
I needed to wind up now.
I will wind up shortly. Thank you, Mayor. And we put that again, but at a slightly higher level. So the Ealing Liberal Democrats have created a package of measures here which will ensure Ealing will be listened to and be cleaner and safer. I commend the amendment.
Thank you. I'm now going to go back. I think you've all got the list. Councillor Kingston, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Donnelly and all those in the background who've worked hard to put together a prudent, balanced budget under such difficult conditions. There's much I applaud in this budget, such as the further 11 million to be spent on adult social care, 20.6 million earmarked for children's social care, and 2.4 million to tackle the scourge of homelessness. However, I wish, in my own word, I wish I could say to the older residents of Lindsay House, there was more money to make their lives a nicer place, to make their flats a nicer place to live. I wish I could tell the parents of Little Ealing Primary there was more money to be spent on special educational needs. I wish there was more money to ensure the future of Northfields Library. I wish I could tell our residents we had more money to invest in our streets so they can feel safe coming home at night. Our hands have been tied, our purse strings have been tied. We all know why our hands have been tied. We all know why our purse strings have been tied. The party of Disraeli, Chamberlain, Baldwin, Macmillan and Major has been hijacked by the rabid right, the ERG, the Tories' own militant tendency. Whilst I don't have the same speechwriter as President Biden, I'm going to follow his example and quote a Walpole resident. We can all remember the autumn of 2022. There was a Conservative Party election dominated by impossible promises, out of touch, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs that led to 7 weeks of chaos when a Conservative government, yes, Councillor Young, a Conservative government not only trashed the economy, but trashed Britain's reputation abroad. Never mind how fulfilling to short-term egos, you can't play politics with people's jobs and services. Please join me in supporting this budget, and I can assure you we will not be hiring taxis to scuttle around Ealing, delivering redundancy notices to our workers.
Thank you, Councillor Kingston. Next up is Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we'll epitomise the stark contrast between, on this side of the chamber, the hope that we offer, on the Tory side, the hopelessness, and on the Lib Dem side, the quite extraordinary haplessness, which seems to redefine parochial politics. But look, firstly, a huge thank you to Councillor Donnelly, Emily Hill, and all of the officers who have put so much hard work into putting together this budget. So look, Mr. Mayor, I've been speaking to a great number of people across West London these past few months, and there are three things that are clear as day to me. Firstly, that people are hurting. There's an economic crisis, a housing crisis, schools are in crisis, an NHS in crisis, councils at crisis point. Britain feels like it's broken. Secondly, it's the Tories what broke it. The economic incompetence of Truss and Kwarteng is replicated locally. We've got neighbouring Tory Hillingdon, which has become nothing more than a Klarna council, living off the virtual credit card and selling their assets off to balance the books, with the third worst reserves in London. And elsewhere, let me quote from today's Telegraph. 4 in 10 councils in England are at risk of going bust over the next 5 years, according to Grant Thornton. More than 100 schools had to close buildings last autumn because of faulty materials meant they were at risk of literally falling apart. Britain is literally crumbling under the Tories. The Tories answer proposed tax cuts that experts and economists say we can ill afford. And thirdly, Mr. Mayor, the solution. Only Labour, locally and nationally, can fix this. As I knocked on doors across the borough, I was struck not just by the desperation for national renewal, but more so on a bitterly cold winter's day, with a number of people greeting me at the door in their coats, scarves and hats, simply unable to pay to heat their homes. That is today's Tory Britain in 2024. A Britain where rents and mortgages are soaring, a Britain where there is a fire sale of landlords' homes, a Britain where construction industry has been brought to its knees, all as a direct consequence of this Tory government. But we are stepping up. We are supporting almost 24,000, supported with the country's most generous council tax support schemes. We are protecting and empowering private renters, whilst the government continues to fail to stop no-fault evictions. And as I've said already, £150 million agreed to intervene in this broken market to buy up decent quality homes so that families can live in, to play in, to cook in, to study in. All the things that Tories at the top just take for granted, but basic rights that every family should be able to expect. Mr. Mayor, this is a budget that brings hope and intervention on the biggest of challenges facing our residents. It is an aspirational budget. Mr. Mayor, it is a Labour budget and I commend it tonight to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfouz. Next up, Councillor Costigan.
Mr. Mayor, tonight is about different visions of Ealing. There's the Labour vision, where we're investing in all our 7 towns, targeting additional support on those who need it most, providing good quality value for money services and creating new affordable homes and decent jobs for our residents. Then there's the vision of the opposition parties. First off, we have the Liberals who, in their amendment, seem to have confused setting out a vision with siphoning money off for their own pet projects. Their big idea is to have their own special council officer that they can get to deliver their own personal fixations. With the council's funding cut by 56%, the Liberals want to waste taxpayers' money on someone to help them cling on to their council seats. This smacks of the worst kind of politics, putting self-interest over the needs of our residents. And how would they pay for this? They have a harebrained plan to get rid of agency staff in environmental services. But it just won't work. If a refuse truck driver calls in sick, we won't be able to collect people's bins if we can't call in an agency driver. They would create chaos. Worse still, they've got no ambition for Ealing, suggesting spending money on work we're already doing. We're already the second best borough in the country when it comes to fining people for fly tipping. We already have teams of people working on green jobs. Just like we're already spending 35 million resurfacing our roads and pavements, and we're doing it more efficiently too by using innovative methods that use less tarmac, saving the taxpayer money. They say they want to charge households with 3 or more cars extra to stop people driving. The rank hypocrisy of them. They fought the new cycle route on Fisher's Lane from the start, proving they're no friends of walking and cycling. In any case, we've already got a just and balanced system of parking charges based on number of cars and emission levels, which helps to clean up our air without unfairly penalising larger families. Mr. Mayor, it's patently clear the Liberal so-called vision is nothing but cynical, short-sighted and small-minded. And then there's the Tories, who have proved tonight, with no alternative plan on the table, that they don't have a vision at all. They'll just vote no to Labour's plans without setting out any alternative for Ealing's future. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised, as the Tories in Westminster have run out of ideas too. They've wrecked our economy and our public services, and now they're hiding behind racism and right-wing rhetoric, too scared to call an election they know they'll lose. Mr. Mayor, I actually get on very well with Councillor Gallant, the Tory leader, and I think he's becoming more and more uncomfortable with his own party. I'm sure, like many decent people who used to back the Tories, he's realised they are no longer the party his parents used to vote for. Instead, Labour is the party with the ideas and the vision to pull our country out of the mess the Tories have got it into. We're doing it here in Ealing, and we can do it for the country. Let's pass this Labour vision for Ealing tonight, and then let's kick the useless, self-interested, morally bankrupt Tories out of Downing Street in the coming election.
Right, thank you. I can see the mood of the next 20 speeches, right? Right, Councillor Rye, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, it's a well-known fact that carers, many of whom give up their jobs, their identity and their whole being to care for the people they love, are the ones that help prop up health and social care. Without them, we know the system would collapse. They save the country in the region of £132 billion a year, a staggering figure for England and Wales. And according to the last census, Ealing has 24,309 carers, equating to 7% of the borough's population. I can now speak with some authority on the subject because I've seen it from both sides as a cabinet member and now as a carer for my husband, who has a degenerative condition. I've lived and continue to live the real-time experience of being his carer 24/7 for 3 years. As a society, we're good at creating language that makes the unpalatable palatable. Personal care, for example, is a comforting phrase, but how many of us would actually stop to think about what it really entails for carers across the borough? It means helping the person we care for with toileting, cleaning up after them, giving them a bath every day, perhaps even shaving them, and doing their daily laundry to make sure they're always clean and well cared for, changing them multiple times a day, cooking food they're able to eat and feeding them. And then, of course, there's the issue of mobility, heavy lifting each time they need to move, being their prop, rather like a shadow to them when they need to try and walk, sit or get up, or even move into a wheelchair or a bed. In fact, doing all the things that they did for themselves when you worked as a team and more, managing the finances, keeping on top of commitments like bills, dealing with family and children and work. It's a tall order. It's both physically and emotionally draining, but what makes it harder is the immense intensity of it all. And so, Mr. Mayor, it's possible that someone deteriorates so quickly that they go from needing no care services at all to a whole array of services within a matter of weeks or even days. Their sudden change in prognosis is then paralleled with a sudden surge in demand for health and social care services that could never be planned for. But planning for anticipated demand is made even more impossible by the Tories, who continue to pay lip service to supporting health and social care, but have in fact spent the last decade and more talking about it rather than strategically trying to fix it. They, with a little help from their Lib Dem friends, have continued to destroy our world-class health and social care system by implementing quick fixes, Mr. Mayor, with plaster that doesn't even stick, not even for the sake of a quick soundbite. And for those on the opposite benches wishing to quote investment figures, I would say, please stop and think. After years of neglect, it doesn't wash well with the woman I met recently who's been caring for her husband for over a decade. And nor does it wash with the daughter who looked after her blind mother for 25 years, also seeing her through cancer to her last breath, all at the expense of her children and her husband. And nor does it bode well with the son who looked after his dying mother intensely for 6 weeks, a mother who spent a lifetime supporting her neighbours through their ill health. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to support this Labour budget, proud because at the heart of it lies the welfare of our residents, including carers, and it comes at a time when the councils are being stripped of their ability to deliver through funding cuts that have been made by successive Tory governments. And this is why this budget commitment by this Labour administration is increasingly more important to the people of our borough. I wholeheartedly support the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Rye. Next up is Councillor Young. We missed you at the last meeting, so you can make up for it tonight.
With your permission, I'll remain seated, Mr.
Of
Mayor.
course you can.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I would like to express my appreciation of the work of Emily Hill and her finance team in bringing forward the budget. It's always an enormous task, the most important decision in any year, not made any easier by knowing that as soon as the task has been completed, you have to start all over again. This evening, the administration has already complained about the amount of taxpayers' money it receives from government, but fails to recognise that austerity was necessary to address the parlous state of the nation's finances, even though they embraced it at the time. Such is the cost of the last Labour government, which left this country spending 30% more than it was receiving in tax receipts, that we are still paying the price. Nevertheless, core spending power for this authority has increased this year by 7.5%. This follows an increase last year of 9.9% and by 6.8% the year before that. This means that compounded core spending power has increased by 26% in the past 3 years alone. Our core spending power has even increased this year by a further 3.6 million between the provisional and final local government statements. What I want to concentrate on tonight is the disparity between this administration's professed lack of money and its behaviour in spending the money it says it doesn't have, spending it quite freely. First of all, we have enough money to fund new revenue growth of 38.8 million this year. This is on top of the 48.6 million revenue growth last budget. In addition, we have had the available resources to increase our reserves by £3.5 million for each of the past 3 years. That adds up to nearly £100 million, and we are supposed to believe that we are short of money. And we're not acting as though we're short of money in other ways. We're spending millions on keeping the town hall closed and millions on keeping the Percival House open, even though this building we're in tonight is less than a quarter full. It is foolish to believe that we can refurbish it and then we'll be able to lease off parts of the building at a time when the demand for office space is at an all-time low following COVID. The previous scheme for rebuilding Percival House fell apart because it was not economically viable. Another foolish scheme. We've had to write off £1.23 million of revenue costs for the aborted scheme. The next plan to build on Percival House car park is to cost an initial £1.7 million to work up, which again, if this scheme also falls apart, will be a revenue cost to our budget. We're supposed to believe that we are short of money. The Cabinet has agreed to spend £180,000 to work up the proposal to create a regional park. It has also allocated an additional £75,000 for the closure of Perivale Park Golf Course. And on top of that, Cabinet has allocated an extra £250,000 revenue for the ill-starred Lido scheme, which adds up to another £500,000 spent when we apparently don't have any money. This year, we're bringing the parking enforcement contract back into the Greener Ealing, and at an estimated cost of £1 million a year. We're also bringing the graffiti contract under the same umbrella. And I note that Greener Ealing has been allocated growth of 373,000 revenue in tonight's papers on page 96. But it's when we come to Gurnell that it's hardest to believe that we are short of money. This administration is currently spending £380,000 a year to keep Gurnell swimming pool closed. It's now proposing to spend £1 million on demolishing the current site. If this is going to save us money, why do we not demolish it years ago? We're supposed to believe that we're short of money, but Cabinet approved yet another £4.5 million additional expenditure for enhancements to the Loon Leisure Centre. A report a year ago on Gurnell said that neither the community nor the site on the floodplain of the River Brent could support the sort of development that would be required to fund rebuilding the leisure centre. And yet, Cabinet has signed a blank cheque to redevelop the site without bringing forward proposals as to how to meet the funding gap, and with no report on the revenue implications of the scheme. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm in favour of a replacement leisure centre, but I'm concerned that a scheme has been approved without a proper assessment of the financial implications. Because if this scheme fails, like the previous scheme, like the personal house development, our write-off costs will be up to £7.8 million on revenue, money which this administration professes we don't have. In short, Mr. Mayor, this administration asks us to believe that we are short of money. But this administration behaves very differently. We should be voting against the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Apologies for the interruption. You did have 8 minutes. Next up is Councillor Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just reading through the Lib Dem amendment to our budget. I was struck by how little they seem to trust our residents and how highly they esteem themselves. In particular, a request for 266,000 additional funds for councillors to give away to residents for projects chosen by themselves. An amendment so parochial and lacking in both vision and ambition, and so self-serving, it's almost like they care more about largesse than actually working to create a fairer and more equal Ealing. An amendment that tweaks rather than offers any kind of solution to the challenges we face today. Anyway, enough about them. House of Commons Library tells us that 86% of austerity measures have fallen on women. So make no mistake, when the Tory attack our local authorities and strip money out of the public sector, they attack women first and foremost. So forgive me as I paraphrase another far more accomplished Labour politician, although I fear Councillor Kingston might have out-Kinnocked me tonight. Some advice: don't be a black woman. In Tory Britain, you are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than a white woman. Don't get raped. In Tory Britain, only 2% of recorded cases result in a charge. Don't be a single mum. In Tory Britain, a resident of mine was just hanging on until their rent was put up £400 a month, and now they are facing homelessness. Don't expect to have a career and be a mum. In Tory Britain, 250,000 women leave the job market each year. In fact, don't work at all. In Tory Britain, the gender pay gap has increased to over 14%. Don't be a woman and be disabled. In Tory Britain, your pay gap will be even greater and you are more likely to be a victim of domestic violence. Don't be on benefits. In Tory Britain, your payments won't cover the basics. And don't be ill. Tory Britain has the largest female health gap in the G20. Don't be a woman and live in a deprived area. In Tory Britain, your life expectancy is going backwards. Don't have your drink spiked. Don't be harassed at school by Andrew Tate fans. Don't leave your violent partner. You'll likely end up homeless and certainly poorer. Don't be one of the 2 women a week murdered by a man known to them. In Tory Britain, it is fair game to target the most vulnerable. Maybe they think we're too ground down, too tired to put up a fight. Our lives are too precarious. But we in Ealing Labour will never accept this. We see the Tories for what they are, happy to exploit the most vulnerable and to take resources from those who have the least to take from. So hear this. In Ealing, we will do everything to protect our most vulnerable, to protect our lowest earners and protect those who have faced 14 years of attack. And when we have a Labour government, they will do the same, hand in hand with us. To the women in Ealing and beyond, happy International Women's Day. I promise you, the future is brighter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haley, the next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start my speech, Councillor Rai, thank you for that moving speech. Mr. Mayor, I am very proud that in the face of prolonged government cuts, a cost of living crisis and a higher demand of our services than ever before, our council has delivered a budget that is sensible and balanced. So thank you, officers and Councillor Donding. Before I start my speech, I want you guys to think about when I advocate for children and when I always talk about children with SEND, I want you all to imagine a 10-year-old with eye cancer, a 10-year-old that had 4 different heart surgeries, and a 9-year-old who's completely blind, struggling in temporary accommodation due to the cuts that we've been faced by the Tory government. I am extremely proud that in the toughest circumstances, Labour Council Rann is delivering on the promises that we have made to residents in May 2022. We at Ealing Labour believe in public service and we believe in their power to change lives for better. Mr. Mayor, the Tory government is doing a disservice to our country. Their mismanagement is driving the country to the ground and we cannot stand to allow our communities to suffer the consequences. Lee Anderson and Suella Vraver has all they've been causing is hate and division between communities. Education and health services are the cornerstones of our communities. They shape the future of our children and they ensure the well-being of our citizenships. However, a decade of brutal austerity measures has cut these essential services to the bone, leaving a devastating effect on the lives across the country. The Tory government have no respect, no understanding, no empathy, no compassion to anyone but themselves. Their approach to funding has placed an unfair burden on local authorities like ours, and we are being forced to do so much with less money. Since 2010, the funding we receive the government has been sliced in half, failing by nearly 56% in real terms. These drastic funding cuts have profound impact on our ability to make sure that we provide our services to the children that I have mentioned in the beginning of my speech. Therefore, our residents struggle in the consequences. One of these areas has been particularly affected is children's services. The funding cuts have left us with limited resources to support and care for our most vulnerable children when they are in need. What is the point of being power, the Tory government, if we are going to neglect those who are vulnerable? But they are too busy attacking people that look like me and those children. It is truly heartbreaking, Mr. Mayor, that these situations where the demand for assistance continues to rise and our ability to meet those needs are severely inhibited. Furthermore, as Councillor Mavis has talked about the housing demands in our borough, it has reached now unmatched levels. As all members will know, the housing market is truly broken, and this means that we are not able to do and address this issue as we want to. As a result, many families in our community are left without access to safe and affordable housing, putting a strain on the social fabric of our neighbourhoods. Despite these challenges, Ealing Council is still committed to find solutions, making a positive impact in our communities, and I completely support the budget that has been put forward. We will fight tooth and nail to provide and work hard and work tirelessly to ensure our communities are respected and not left behind. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Haley. Councillor Mason, you speaking now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Despite what you might read in the media and certainly from the press releases of the Conservative Party, the cost of living crisis is not easing. Every resident in this borough has the experience of knowing that they are paying more for their energy costs. They are paying more for their weekly shop. They are certainly paying more in interest payments for their mortgages, and the cost of renting is skyrocketing. And just like every single one of the people in this room and every single resident out there in our borough today, they know the challenge of doing more with less. And that is exactly the same challenge that this council faces with the budget that we face next year, but in the overall sum of the future years too. It's deeply disappointing, therefore, to hear from the Tories a total aversion to reality, in which they seem to forget a little thing called inflation, that taken together with austerity over the last 14 years has seen this council see our budget cut by 56%, doing more with less. It is shameful that the Liberal Democrats can sit there proposing a budget amendment that says nothing about the rising demands of older people facing longer lives spent in ill health. It is shameful that they have nothing to say about family breakdown and the increasing number of our young people who need help and support in their education. And it is shameful that they sit there and say nothing about the consequence of homelessness in our society. And the 4,000 families that have approached us as a council over the last year to say that they are homeless as a consequence of the Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss catastrophe. We as a council are having to invest less money than we have ever had in meeting those needs. £22 million for children, £11 million for adults, and over £5 million for temporary accommodation and homelessness on top of our purchasing programme in wider society. It cannot be right that we sit as an administration having to try and do right by our residents to tackle the climate emergency, to fight inequality and to deliver the genuinely affordable homes and decent living incomes that our residents need, whilst the opposition continue to remain in an alternative reality. Now, quoting from politicians from the 1980s seems to be quite popular today. So I'm also going to quote from one too. Are you better off than you were 14 years ago? Are your children better off? Do they have greater opportunities? Do you have hope for the future that your life will be better? Do you have the security of knowing that the roof over your head will still be there in a year's time? Do you have the hope to be able to enjoy the good things in your life? The reality of the forthcoming election is that our country will be answering that simple and basic question. And if you, like me, have experienced any of the last 14 years of the promises that were made to reduce the deficit, of the promises made to restore public services, of the promises made on so many fronts, failed. Failed by a Liberal Party who put the Tories into power, who set off a course of destruction and despair. But Ealing, I plead with you, don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. We have an opportunity at the forthcoming general election to set out a new and hopeful vision for our country. One that restores growth, one that delivers the homes that we need, one that makes sure that we are looking after the most vulnerable in our society. And we know from our own budget here in Ealing that those things are possible. Not just in how we prioritise our investments in the things that we know that we need to do for the most vulnerable in our society, but also speaking truth to the things that we have promised. A new Lido for our borough, a restored Gurnell, a new regional park, delivering 4,000 genuinely affordable homes, 10,000 new jobs, and the best of both worlds of rewilding and sports at Warren Farm.
You wind it up, please.
Our budget speaks to the people of Ealing in the challenge that they find themselves in here today, but it also gives you a glimpse of what a future Labour government will be able to deliver. Mr. Mayor, I commend the budget. I commend Councillor Donnelly and all of the hard work of our officers to reach this place. And I ask to the whole council that we endorse the budget for next year.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I speak in favour of the Liberal Democrat budget amendment, I'd like to reinforce one broader point that was made by Councillor Busuttil earlier, that the number one reason this council isn't in the financial crisis faced by many others now is the unexpected combination of financial circumstances stalling capital schemes plus rocketing interest rates caused by the brief chaotic Liz Truss premiership, leaving us as a council with £500 million in the bank, borrowed at low interest rates, from which we make a £20 million windfall profit, which conveniently offsets our overspends. This will continue into the forthcoming year, but is a windfall that will not last forever. Turning to our amendment, it represents a progressive step forward for our community, focusing on fiscal responsibility, environmental sustainability, and support for struggling families. And it has been signed off as financially sound by our finance officers. Firstly, I urge the council to reduce agency and contractor staff, saving over £1 million. This move not only saves money, but also underscores our commitment to prioritising permanent roles within the council, which are both more likely to be filled by local residents and will also deliver a more consistent long-term service. Furthermore, the reduction in the printing budget by 20% demonstrates our dedication to embracing digital solutions and reducing paper waste, aligning with our net zero goal. The proposal to implement a flat rate parking permit fee of £200 for households with 3 or more cars promotes more sustainable travel, contributing to a cleaner and more sustainable environment. But also, in many of our streets, there simply isn't room for a third car owned by a single household. So in terms of fairly rationing road space for the benefit of all residents, discouraging excess cars makes sense. The expansion of the Local Welfare Assistance Fund will provide much needed support to struggling families, helping to mitigate the impacts of economic hardship in the ongoing cost of living crisis. I also support the initiative to increase street cleaning efforts, targeting fly tipping hotspots identified by ward councillors. I'm sure all of us can not only see these eyesores ourselves, but also receive emails and social media mentions from residents justifiably angry that their street gets constant litter and fly tipping. Street cleansing frequency should not be on a one-size-fits-all basis. This proposal not only enhances the cleanliness of our streets, but also fosters a sense of pride and community ownership. The creation of a neighbourhood liaison officer role underscores our commitment to engaging with residents and prioritising their concerns, ensuring that council policies align with the needs and aspirations of the communities in each of our 7 towns. Furthermore, the proposed Business Go Green scheme, with its focus on sustainability and green behaviours in local businesses, exemplifies our commitment to environmental stewardship and economic innovation. Finally, our amendment includes additional funding for pavement repairs and road faults. Potholes and broken paving make journeys dangerous for pedestrians, cyclists and motorists. In particular, the street trees that add so much to the character of our borough unfortunately push paving stones up and make them dangerous in many parts of our borough. So, in conclusion, Mr. Mayor, I urge all members of this council to support the Liberal Democrat amendment tonight. By embracing fiscal responsibility, environmental sustainability, and listening to our communities, we can build a brighter future for all residents of Ealing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Speaker number 13 is Councillor Kelly.
Unlucky for some, lucky for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Opportunity to speak. I'm going to go back to the 1st century, not 1970s. St. Matthew says in the Book of Good News, he says, "Show me your treasure and I'll show you where your heart is." And I know with this budget, the Ealing Labour Group knows where their heart is. Since my election in 2014, I've been summoned here 10 times, having to pass, we have praise and scorn poured upon us when we make these necessary, logical, incremental cuts. And it's all been quite normal. Well, it's been a normal routine for my 10 years at least. But something very, very different happened. We've had the debacles of Brexit, Boris Johnson, Kwasi Kwarteng, and Liz Truss. And in September 2022, they announced something. Does anybody remember what they called it? They called it the growth plan. Except there was no growth and there was no planning. And how did the markets react? Well, we know. We've spoke about it today. Interest rates going up, mortgages going up, mortgages being pulled, in fact, and the cost of living. Now, the estimated total when the Bank of England moved in was £63 billion. Now, I'm quite sure Councillor Donnelly would have a few ideas how to invest Ealing's share of £65 billion. He's nodding. Instead, now we have the real prospect of 2 in 5 local authorities issuing Section 114 notices within the next 18 months. And I believe it wholly is the fault of the Tories. They are responsible for this. Now, despite these forecasts, we continue in Ealing to forge ahead with our inclusive economy, addressing the cost of living crisis, the growth of social care, special educational needs, and homelessness, which has all spiked exponentially in the last 18 months. Now, whilst local authorities all over the country are struggling to balance the books, doing the heavy lifting of governing, what do the Tory MPs do? They continue to wage war on the British people. Anderson, Braverman, ramping up the hateful rhetoric of minority groups, the duly elected mayors of cities, and outrageously on Londoners themselves. And we've also got the grotesque chaos, to use a Kinnock-ism, the grotesque chaos of a former prime minister going to America and standing beside Steve Bannon, of all people. Mr.
Can
Mayor,
you wind it up, please?
could we ask a question of the leader of the Tories, Councillor Gallant, not to put words in his mouth? What happened to the One Nation Conservatives, Councillor Gallant? What happened? Anyway, back to our budget,
Be quick with it.
which has been spoken
Very
about
kind.
in detail.
Quick,
Thank you,
quick,
Mr. Mayor.
one sentence,
One
complete.
moment, please. I'd just like to thank the leadership team and council. Please vote for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank the mayor for letting me know over time. But okay, next up is, if I get this right, correct one, Councillor King now, pal, right? Yes, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening, we discuss a budget put together with meticulous detail in the harshest of climates, while we witness local services up and down the country continuing to deteriorate under the weight of the Tories' economic mismanagement. Since 2010, when the coalition government imposed sharp cuts on local authorities, leaving them to grapple with the harsh consequences. For 14 long years, we've witnessed a heartbreaking downward spiral fueled by the Tories' inability to manage finances effectively, exacerbated by soaring inflation and a stagnant economy. Despite these many challenges, Ealing, as a local authority, should feel an absolute sense of pride that we have prudently managed our finances, ensuring that Ealing remains a well-run borough. Since 2010, councils have been coping with unprecedented financial pressures and an ever-increasing demand on services. The costs of providing essential services like social care have skyrocketed, while the shortage of affordable housing has led to a heartbreaking rise in homelessness. But despite these challenges, this administration remains committed to supporting our communities. We understand that Ealing residents deserve towns and neighbourhoods filled with pride, identity, and care. So instead of dwelling solely on the challenges, let's talk about solutions. Our budget allocation reflects our unwavering commitment to address the pressing needs of our residents. We're investing 11 million in adult social care, 20.6 million in children's social care, and 5 million in housing and environmental initiatives, of which 2.4 million will be dedicated to tackling homelessness head-on. Moreover, we're empowering our communities to take charge of their own destinies. More decisions will be made at grassroots level, fostering stronger, more resilient neighbourhoods and driving local economic growth. Our investments extend beyond just meeting immediate needs. They pave the way for a brighter future for all of Ealing's residents. We've pledged 150 million to create new temporary accommodation, reducing the reliance on commercial hotels and bed and breakfasts. Additionally, we're fulfilling our promises to deliver essential infrastructure like a new leisure centre at Gurnell and a grand regional park. Our vision extends to creating thousands of well-paid jobs, building genuinely affordable homes, and establishing new green spaces. In conclusion, while the road ahead may be fraught with challenges, our resolve remains unshakable. We will continue to stand by our communities, fighting for a brighter, more prosperous future for all. Together, by supporting this fantastic, well-thought-out budget, let's continue to build an Ealing that we're proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. Next up, and welcome back, is Councillor Shani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to be making a speech today in support of the budget, and it's my first since the birth of my baby son, Blyn. Thank you. So I have been in a bit of a bubble for the last 5 months, but I will briefly speak on my experiences in that bubble. So in the last 5 months, I've been really able to experience firsthand some of the council services, which I hadn't really thought about before, of course, in this way. So from children's centres providing an array of classes and support services to our public libraries, which are enriching early experiences of babies through regular rhyme times and sessions like this. I've really seen how our council services at the start of life really help to reduce inequality and are vital for the future of our borough. And it's also really a testament, I've been thinking, of how this Labour-led council is providing a buffer against the Tory austerity that we've seen over the last 14 years. We are really delivering quality services on the ground and providing value for money for local residents. But as I say, every day, the continued Tory cuts and what we're seeing with the disastrous mismanagement of the economy threatens and puts at risk these really vital services across the country. But just today, briefly, I just want to say congratulations to Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Mason and the whole team for bringing forward this budget that's inclusive and it continues to stand by the most vulnerable in our society, including the package on social care and children's services, which are so crucial. We continue to work hard to deliver excellent services to local people whilst maintaining a balanced budget. And in the background of everything going on with the economy, I think that is a really important feat. So congratulations and hopefully it goes through. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to you is Councillor Gillane.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I want to echo my thanks to Emily and the team for putting the budget together. You're so helpful for all of us, and we really appreciate it. And I also appreciate how difficult it is to work in this one-year environment as well. Obviously, you're looking for a longer-term settlement, and I do appreciate that. As predicted, Labour have used tonight to condemn the government's parsimony, and I've heard some wonderful stuff. I can't answer. I've got time to answer that now, but One Nation. I've heard some wonderful stuff. ERG militancy and waging war on the British people and so on. And by the way, I too get on very well with Councillor Costigan, and some of her policies actually I do agree with, especially vehicle idling, as she well knows. But she'll wait a long time for me to cross the floor. Crossing the floor will take a long time. But Mr. Mayor, we have not heard anything from this tonight from Labour about the world circumstances, COVID. You know, we haven't heard anything about conflict and what effect that's had on the economy. But the amazing thing of all is we haven't heard a word about what policies the Labour government might put forward. I haven't heard the name Keir Starmer has not been uttered tonight. I think they're just embarrassed about him, or maybe they're embarrassed about his spiteful little policy to add VAT on independent school fees, which is not going to raise any money at all. Mr. Mayor, there is no untapped pot of gold. We're living in difficult times, but the government has listened. It's increased funding to local authorities. Our core spending is up by 7.5%. That's an extra 3.5 million on what was expected. And of course, most of that is going to meet social care and the unprecedented demand for adult and child social care. But Ealing is also able to put £3.5 million into its reserves. And we have no argument with that at all. But what we don't agree on, of course, is the £75,000 spending on closing at the perfectly good golf course, a green space used by thousands of people, literally thousands of people. £250,000 on scoping out this Lido project, whatever you want to call it, that will probably prove impractical and not be used very much at all because it's simply too cold. On a serious matter, I am concerned about the borrowing of £150 million to fund emergency housing, but I do understand completely that a solution has to be found for all the money that's being spent on hotels and so on, and I would welcome dialogue on that. What concerns me is the council will be saddling itself with unviable assets, but that's a long-term thing. Mr. Mayor, town forums, we've heard tonight £2 million is going to be spent on town forums, but how will that eventually be spent? Who will control that expenditure? What will the representation be? We simply don't know. So these are unknowns, Mr. Mayor. This is a budget where there's sound financial thinking in some respects, but it's cloaked in this kind of Labour fantasy, and I assure you we will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gallant. I think we've broken the mid-session lull here, so because councillor Johnson is next.
Get the thing to work. Right, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been to a number of budgets. I think I've been to 37. I can't remember, something like that anyway. Quite a lot of budgets over the years. The only person, other people, Councillor Dear behind me and Councillor Young at the end of this row. And of course, everyone works hard and we wouldn't be here but for our officers. We're very fortunate. We've always had very good officers at the helm in Ealing who work very hard to produce the budget. And I thank Councillor Donnelly and all the officers getting this for us. Now, we've had very conflicting views tonight from the opposition. Councillor Young tells us off for spending money, and the Liberals say we're very lucky to have all the interest rates and all this money to spend on things. So they're telling us different things. At least Councillor Gallant did talk about social care, adults and children, but he was rather concerned, unfortunately, about independent schools, and that's only a small minority of our children. I would be happy if he spoke about all the children in Ealing, not those just in independent schools. The Liberals never really talk about children very much, which I don't know why. There's more of them now. They could actually be on governing bodies. There's nothing to stop them. I know some of them have been in the past, but it doesn't seem to be one of their things. They love the environment and potholes. They like things that they can put front page on one of their delivery leaflets. And as somebody suggested, whether that's right or not, or wrong, that they want neighbourhood officers. What do they want these neighbourhood officers to do? Well, we can guess. One, oh, well, that's not going to do very much, is it? But instead of being proud of what we've done in Ealing when it comes to the environment, we have a very good record, as Councillor Costigan said. They don't seem to realise that. They get very much, unfortunately, the Liberals stuck in minutiae. Printing costs. Okay, I've been hearing about printing costs for over 30 years. And of course, it's something we've done a lot about. I'm one of these wicked people who likes paper copies, so I admit that. But the rest of you are all very good, and you have your things in front of your surfaces and so on. But I like the written paper, I'm afraid. So I'm a naughty person. I know Councillor Young is a naughty person as well, who likes his paper. But that's only going to be factual. I don't know why the Liberals get so tied up in minutiae. Now, as I don't want to repeat too much of what all my colleagues said, but we've had a 56% cut. You remember when you were last in power, there was an actual Labour government and you got money. You got money to do things. Councillor Young always goes on about how we welcomed and loved austerity. We had no choice at the time. We had to have frozen council tax because otherwise we'd have had to spend money having sending out consultation, and we knew from other London boroughs that people didn't want to pay more. It wasn't ideal. So I'm sorry that we didn't build up a chest of money that would have been good and helpful for now, but we just couldn't do it. I think Ealing has always been very sensible. Councillor Ball went on about how we've got all this money because we haven't used it on capital projects. Well, it's the same for all the authorities in the country, but Ealing has always been incredibly sensible. We've always had good scrutiny, good audit. Councillor Busuttil, who's very helpful on audit, but why he's so concerned, I'll try and be quicker, why he's so concerned about cars, I don't know, and wanting to reduce permits for people who've got free cars. Well, he should say they shouldn't have free cars. And then his colleague, Councillor Ball, says they shouldn't have them because they're taking up road space. So I think they need to get their act sorted out somewhere. So can I commend, sorry, I don't needed a lot more time and it's not fair because everybody else has to speak, but can I commend the budget presented to us and welcome it? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dan Crawford, don't be naughty.
Yes, I'm very naughty. Councillor Taylor, and with your permission, I'm going to remain seated as well. It's very difficult to follow Councillor Johnson, but I'll do my best. And I'll start by saying to Councillor Gallant very directly, I'm very proud of a Labour Party led by Keir Starmer, and I'm quite happy to list plenty of Labour policies, and I'm very proud that the next Labour government will levy VAT charges against independent schools, because we need to invest in inclusive mainstream education for all students of Ealing. I'm proud that this budget prioritises inclusion. That starts in our schools. Instead of implementing the DfE edict to cut ECHPs by 20%, as we've heard from our colleagues this evening, we're supporting more than 6,000 children with special educational needs to fulfil their potential, thanks to Ealing's excellent teachers, teaching assistants, support staff and their parents. That's very important to me, and I know it's very important to the rest of Ealing's residents. The challenges we face aren't new, but they need new thinking. Assembling an accessible offer for adulthood for many of these young people. Transition remains crucial. I'd like to commend at this point the work of Letting Grow, a charity founded by my constituent Ross Walker, who has offered introduction to gardening to local teenagers. I'm pleased that this council has courageously and finally committed to expand direct payments, promoting personalisation and a chance to shape the services of tomorrow, rather than warehousing disabled people like other authorities. Inclusion also requires inspiration. That's why our bid for Borough of Culture, championed by Councillor Newstall, with the North Acton Cultural Enterprise Zone at its heart, is so important. Anyone anxious about the viability of Gurnell or Warren Farm should recall how the state-of-the-art facilities at Rectory Park came about, or how Acton High Street now hosts a community-run cinema, as well as a local library, leisure centre and state-of-the-art swimming facility. I'll give them a clue. It's because of this Labour Council. Healthier lives are happier ones, and spending on sporting facilities will create the next generation of legends to follow in the footsteps of just a few names here: Les Ferdinand, Linford Christie, Hannah McLeod, Alice Ty, Bukayo Saka, and of course, Chloe Kelly. This budget, Mr. Mayor, won't be a panacea, but the cynicism of a clapped-out Conservative government won't diminish our ambition for Acton or endanger Ealing's future. Our brilliant borough deserves much better than that. It deserves much better than the Tories or the Liberal Democrats could offer. Local councils like this one could do much more to consolidate community power and representation with more resources. But as Councillor Gallant has introduced this evening, that will only come with the election of a new Labour government led by Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to commend the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Next up is Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we have all heard the story tonight of the devastating cuts which have left us struggling to ensure the basics for our residents, let alone for other needs, including self-esteem. I visited Wandsworth Prison in 2005 when I was researching my dissertation on prison libraries and the rehabilitation of prisoners. I also got the chance to visit prisoners and patients in Feltham and Broadmoor and witness newfound commitments to reading and having a second chance. What does all this have to do with the budget? Well, it is the role that literacy has in preventing reoffending, and prevention is better than cure. So I'm glad to see how our council plan demonstrated ambition for our young to learn and to expand their horizons and most likely avoid crime in the first place. When we met here before to discuss the council plan, I was impressed by the rabbi who opened the meeting by emphasising education, mental health and valuing individuals and enabling a sense of self-worth. Ealing It Takes a Town from the council plan understood how critical those early years are and how our children and young people deserve opportunities to engage and build confidence, whatever their background. What a commendable holistic approach which mirrors national Labour policy, where a Labour government will put speaking skills at the heart of the curriculum in order to smash the glass ceiling. A Labour government will also introduce open access mental health hubs into every community, as well as place more mental health professionals into our schools. And these policies are among what teachers want most for our children and young people. And I'm sure that those I met in Broadmoor would be impressed too. Ealing already seeks to lead the way on this with the council plan, which will ensure that 75% of schools have a designated mental health lead and also establish community-based support to improve mental health resilience. What a contrast with crumbling schools from the Tories. And I was thrilled this week to hear Liz Kendall this week talk about young people and education and employment, and reform of the failed apprenticeships levy. How training can offer a life beyond that of a dependency on benefits. Ealing Labour will do what we can until a Labour government puts in place even stronger foundations for all in our borough. This is a budget which prioritises the basics whilst offering much more besides. May opportunity, well-being and self-worth continue to be priorities for Ealing Labour too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Next up, number 20 is Councillor Kamal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, my thank you to Emily Hill, Kevin, and the team who have brought forward this budget. There's always concern when people are affected by services in their daily routine. One is too many as far as I'm concerned. But before I go ahead, I've listened to all that's been said. And I want to say that we are caring. I myself am a compassionate, caring, kind person, and I've done that most of my life. It has been dedicated to helping children in need, vulnerable people, the elderly, and I continue to do so, including caring for a beloved mother who suffered from cancer, who sadly passed away. I mean, I was not on the doorstep for that, but my residents were assured, reassured me that they did not to see me on the doorstep because I was doing a duty, and they will, when they go to the ballot box, they will see the amount of work that I've done in serving them. Throughout COVID, I was at the forefront, providing equipment and food to hospitals, including to nearly 1,000 residents of Ealing. I also brought a doctor to the homeless to see if they were suffering from any injuries or bruises or needed care. So I think my colleagues and I will continue to serve residents, be it a small or big issue. One of the points I wish to raise is transparency and better communication with residents of our borough. Not being able to connect with relevant departments is, to say the least, rather frustrating, as timeframes for responses in many cases take longer and are not followed up to the residents' expectations. Isn't it about time to bring more staff into Percival House so residents are able to interact face-to-face, thereby prioritizing their needs and interests? Waste collections has been a topic lately, and their waste collections are missed or in some instances not collected until the ward councillors intervene. I'm a strong advocate of the need for contractors to be better managed and monitored. Residents have to trek down to the dump, which is an alternative, but by appointment, only causing further hassle and inconvenience to those that do not drive. Garden waste service for this year has risen in order to reflect the cost to the council for providing the service, while the service is cut. No collections from December for 3 months. Bad news. For those who live in leafy parts of Ealing, residents who use the facility have bins full, including December and January, as there are still a lot of leaves to collect. Last year, the leaves hung onto the trees quite late in the season, which meant residents could not even start to clear up until later in the year. I'm told the garden waste service is discretionary and offered to residents lucky enough to have a garden, really. Some residents do compost as much as possible, but there is a limit. And this is coming from the residents. No collection could result in smoky bonfires during the pause period. Possible compromises also being suggested, which would be a monthly collection during the pause, and is considered to be reasonable. This is the service they need.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think it's a laughing matter, actually. So I'm thankful again to all the officer team who worked to deliver this budget But Mr. Mayor, I'm not entirely convinced and will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Hey, next in for the doors at 21 is Councillor Wesson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise in support of the Labour Group's budget for the coming financial year. To echo Councillor Donnelly, huge thanks to Emily Hill, our Strategic Director for Resources, and her team for their significant work in preparing for today. In terms of the backdrop, we know that councils up and down the country are being thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. The increasing numbers of councils issuing Section 114 notices, effectively declaring bankruptcy, paints a grim picture for local government, irrespective of political persuasion. In fact, Mr. Mayor, sadly, I've had first-hand experience of the gravity of that situation and how difficult things can get. As part of my first job, I was in the room when the first of 2 Section 114 notices were issued in Northamptonshire. And of course, no one aspires to be in that dire reality. But there is no doubt in my mind that the current approach that this Conservative government is taking is making a bad situation even worse. As the Cabinet member has already reminded us, the year-to-year settlements make everything very unpredictable. After announcing a typically Conservative settlement at the 11th hour, the Tory government then offered up a few additional breadcrumbs for social care. In providing this last-minute additional funding, the Tories clearly acknowledge that the crisis in local government finance is real. Councils in England continue to face a funding gap of £4 billion across this year and next. The local government settlement does nothing to change this, and councils desperately need to plug gaps in areas such as children's services, social care, and homelessness. Of course, some money is better than nothing, but last-minute piecemeal funding announcements won't address the long-term pressures in the sector caused by increasing demand and 14 years of Conservative cuts. The Tories' focus seems to be on levelling down rather than levelling up our country. We must stand against this and work towards a brighter, more equitable future for all. Mr. Mayor, we come into politics to make a real difference. Local government plays a crucial role in how we achieve that. And Councillor Gallant, I hope you are listening to this. I very much hope, and we need a Labour government led by Sir Keir Starmer to provide the long-term financial settlements to get councils back on track. I hope we get that chance in May or whenever his party plucks up the courage to call a general election the country so desperately needs. I commend the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Kate Crawford, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to begin by paying a personal tribute, because it's the first opportunity I've had, to our much missed colleague, Phil Portwood, councillor for East Acton for 23 years. I might not have been born in East Acton, as Phil was, but thanks to his support and the kindness of our constituents, East Acton is now definitely in me. I know Phil would approve of this budget that puts the interests of Actonians and all Ealing residents first. Balancing budgets has become a tricky task over the past decade. So I want to commend the work of Emily Hill, thank you, and our dedicated council officers, and indeed to the Cabinet member, Councillor Donnelly, who's obviously worked tremendously hard. This budget safeguards vital services from Conservative cuts, but it is innovative as well. I'm delighted that we will be bringing parking enforcement back into a successful greener Ealing structure and expanding direct payments. I'm also proud that we continue to invest more than 31 million into social care. Even if integrating our care, health and community services will unfortunately have to wait for the election of a new Labour government led by Keir Starmer. I'm pleased by the rollout of co-production boards that will give Ealing residents the opportunity to shape the services they use, giving our constituents the chance to craft the care they want to use will be genuinely transformative. And I look forward to working in partnership with carers across the borough to ensure their roles and experiences are recognised. And I have to pay tribute to the wonderful speech we had on carers this evening. I think it touched all our hearts. This approach won't just save money, but unlock the true talents of all Ealing residents. It can be truly transformational, just as our increased investment in education has led to more Ealing students continuing their journey to further or higher education. Many apprenticeships are based in East Acton and North Acton wards, and I know that there is so much more to come. So I'm very proud to endorse this progressive programme of measures to continue the progress we've made over the last 14 years and to build a brighter future for everyone in Ealing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Next up, Councillor Kwanzaa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Enough respect to Officer Emily, Councillor Donnelly, and the rest of the team for our wonderful budget. Britain is broken. Local government is in crisis thanks to uncompromising cuts to council budgets by successive Conservative governments since Osborne's 2010 austerity-driven chancellorship. Between 2010 and 2020, councils have lost more than 50% of central government funding. 6 councils have already gone bankrupt in the last 2 years, while a further 50% more predict a similar fate. Whilst councils in England are making drastic decisions to find money to meet rising demands for homelessness and urgent social care services, the Chancellor seems obsessed with using tomorrow's budget as leverage for NI cuts to quieten his rowdy backbenchers and sweet talk an increasingly disgruntled electorate. Such pre-election gimmicks simply won't wash with our residents. We all want our NHS to be rescued and assistance with the cost of living crisis triggered by Truss and Kwarteng's disastrous 2022 budget. Despite 14 years of Tory fiscal mismanagement, damaging inflation and economic stagnation, this council's record of managing our finances with care and prudence means Ealing is running an efficient council. Still, we cannot be complacent. So this council has put some safeguards in place. Since 2010, Ealing's funding from government has been slashed realistically by almost 56%. That is barely enough to cover the rising costs of providing social care to vulnerable groups. As we approach International Women's Day, let us not forget too that women have been hit hardest by 14 years of cuts to health, social care and early education and services to survivors of domestic abuse and sexual violence. The Forsyth Society, TUC, Women's Aid all plead for no more cuts to public services. Women are now 7 times more likely than men to be jobless due to care and responsibilities. That figure rises to 12 times more likely for Black and ethnic minority women. Children too are impacted. Since 2010, England has lost over 1,400 of the children's centres that the last Labour government set up to tackle developmental issues. It's a national crisis. Children's charity Kindred found that school staff report deteriorating school readiness, including children not being potty trained enough, okay? And teachers are having to work hard to train children. Today's LSC, only today, LSC Professor Tony Travis said the public actually trusts councillors more than they trust their own MPs. Okay, Ealing residents want to live in towns and neighbourhoods full of pride, identity and care, and often know best how to make that a reality. Despite this context, Ealing Council has delivered a balanced budget that continues to deliver high quality services that residents care most about, while also in our for our 7 towns, empowering, enabling communities to be more involved, thus creating stronger, resilient towns and neighbourhoods and economic growth. So this budget sets aside 11 million to adult social care, 20.6 million to children and social care, 5 million to housing and environment, and 2.4 million from that figure invested into combating homelessness. In response to what residents say matters to them, we are committed to delivering a brand new leisure centre at Gurnell, plus a grand regional park and a super new Lido for the borough. We're also delivering on our mission to create 10,000 new well-paid jobs, 4,000 generally affordable homes and 10 new parks. I'm almost finished, Mr. Mayor. We will be supporting schools to continue delivering excellent education for our young people, especially children with special educational needs and disability. I will end on this. Coretta Scott King once said, "The failure to invest in young reflects a lack of compassion and a colossal failure of common sense." This council is managing its budget with care, caution, compassion, and common sense. And I too look forward to a Labour government quickly to whip the Conservatives out of number 10. And I commend this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it counts as.
Mr. Mayor, we don't use words like whip.
With what? Okay.
In a violent context.
Okay, I didn't. We're almost at the end. I was about to say, obviously, councillors trusted more than MPs, so my question was going to be, who wants to become an MP, right? But anyway, last 2 speakers, Councillor Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to struggle to match that passion, I think, in my speech. But Councillor Rye and Councillor Kumar both spoke about the plight of carers, and Councillor Rye, without any veneer, you spoke about that quite passionately, and it was quite sobering to hear. It highlights the increasing demand on social care, and the revenue budget shows that between this year and 27-28, that the council hopes to reduce the spend on adult social care. The council already successfully implemented early intervention schemes to bring the cost down, and we're already spending one of the lowest per person in London on social care. So I am concerned about how realistic these reductions that are being proposed in the budget are. We heard a lot this evening about the vision for the borough, but the reality on the ground doesn't always marry with the words that are heard in the chamber. Papers for Scrutiny Review Panel 2 next week show that growth rate in Ealing hasn't kept up with the growth in London or the rest of the country. The number of jobs in Ealing is the same as it was in 2015. Again, not in contrast to the average in London. We have one of the highest number of jobs paying less than the London living wage. We have more of those jobs than Hackney, Newham, or Tower Hamlets. The administration talks big on the London living wage, on creating jobs, but again, that doesn't marry with the reality on the ground. This is the record of the 14 years of Labour in Ealing. Absolutely, there is too much inequality and too many people struggling. And Councillor Crawford talked about the importance of education, and absolutely, I agree with that. That's why 89% of schools now are rated good or outstanding, compared to 68% in 2010. Or primary school children having shot up league tables are now the best readers in the Western world. In secondary schools, up from 27th internationally to 11th in maths, or 25 to 13th when it comes to reading. If there is anything that would improve someone's life chancing, it's ensuring they have the best education possible. And over the last 14 years, in all of those parameters, it has gone up. We are undoubtedly in difficult economic times, but as Councillor Gallant spoke about, the impacts of COVID and the inflation pressures from the war in Ukraine having a huge impact on our economy. Despite all of this, since 2010, we have the third highest growth in the G7, more than France, Italy, or Japan. There's 5.7 million apprenticeships have been delivered since 2010. a halving of youth unemployment compared to 2010. And we have one of the lowest rates of youth unemployment in the whole of Europe and a record number of people in work. So there is undoubtedly a difficult time economically, but the record over the last 14 years is of growth over that period of time on delivering a better education system and more life chances for young people. Mr. Mayor, on the budget this evening, we will not be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Conti. So finally, speaker number 25, Councillor Manro.
Last but not least, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must begin with a huge thank you to all the officers involved in this year's budget process. We know how difficult it has been this year, and they've worked extremely hard to deliver a budget that's balanced and that allows us to continue delivering for our residents. Mr. Mayor, this time last year, as we passed the budget, I spoke of Thurrock, Slough, Northampton, Spelthorne and Croydon. A year on, and the situation has got worse. Havering, bailed out by 54 million. Nottingham City Council, 23 million overspend. Woking, where it's 1.2 billion. I have no doubt when we meet again at next year's budget, there will be new names to add to what is an overgrowing list of local authorities suffering from financial pressures. And the government has just given 19 councils, such as Eastbourne, Midway, Somerset, Cheshire East, Plymouth, Thurrock, permission to sell off their assets to pay for day-to-day spending, Councillor Young. Your government is making them sell off their assets and then use it for revenue spending, which I think you wouldn't support. I think the basic point is that we are in a position where we are, luckily our treasury management system and our treasury management has been really exemplary and have managed to help us manage the overspend in this year's budget. Yes, and everybody remember Boris Johnson's oven-ready social care package? Where did that go? Nowhere. So they leave local authorities to try and spend money that they haven't got on social care. Now, as for housing, Councillor Gallant, yes, we have set aside £150 million to purchase homes. I think homes are normally the safest things you can buy because you can sell them on if you don't need them. And the costs to us are enormous of temporary accommodation, as Councillor Mahfouz has pointed out. It's going to cost us over £5 million a year for hotel rooms. It's £4,000 a month for one room. And when you look at emails from single parents with 3 children in one room, begging for a home, that's where the care is. We need the assets. We need the ability to manage, to purchase these homes, to give our residents a stability and a home that they can sustainably live in and hopefully get a job, a sustainable job that they can afford to pay for. I think basically we are in a position where we're headed towards a prefaces. I think if we don't get this Tory government out of office soon, they're going to bankrupt this country. And I think that's what we need. We need a general election as quickly as possible so that we can get people building again. Golf links, I'll be there soon to look at our housing as we go to topping out there. We are building some homes still, but the government has made it really difficult for us to carry on with the delivery of the 4,000 generally affordable homes we need. Therefore, we need a Labour government, absolutely and quickly. And I would commend this budget, but I think we will be suffering the same problems next year and the year after unless we get rid of the Tory government. Thank you.
Thank you. So first up to sum up is Councillor Busuttil, who's going to sum up the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there needs to be some corrections on what some councillors have said about our amendment. First of all is Councillor Costigan. Actually, in our amendment, it suggests excluding adult social care, children's services and housing and the environment from that savings. Councillor Newstub you mentioned about the 266,000. That would actually be beneficial to all wards, whether it had Labour, Conservative or Lib Dem councillors in them. Councillor Mason, the decision on Warren Farm, I think, was due to public pressure and Lib Dem campaigning. Councillor Johnson, the £200 parking permit is actually an increase, not a reduction on 3 cars or more. And Councillor Manro, we did actually support the £150 million spend. So I just thought I might correct you on those. Look, I think I know where this this amendment is going, and I'm quite sure if it's not going to be approved today, then I'm sure some of those amendments will be in next year's budget, which is absolutely fine because we'll take the credit for that. We'll do it via a press release.
Okay, thank you. All right, last up to sum up the motion is Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just amending right of reply and like that right of reply absolutely clearly mentions in environment and living services within the amendment, absolutely clearly does. An element of Groundhog Day struck me during the debate. I can never be confused with a grumpy old Bill Murray, clearly, but I went back and looked at last year's debate. I moved, Councillor Busuttil moved an amendment, Councillor Malcolm seconded the amendment, and a bit later on, Councillor Ball popped up to speak. End of Lib Dem contributions. This year, well, the same thing happened. And I think, Mr. Mayor, there'd be more credibility to the Liberal Democrat amendment if it looked like more of their group had any faith in it to the point they were willing to speak in its defence. But until they're willing to do so, I'll have to do the best for them. A balance of realistic. More than once, there were attempts made to suggest that the amendment is a good thing because officers have approved it. Officers don't approve the amendments. Officers merely state that at worst, it doesn't lead to immediate cataclysm. Departments must learn to work together. That's the job of Cabinet. That's the job of the senior leadership team. That's what leadership of the council will be doing. There are 70 neighbourhood liaison officers in this borough, and they're all sat here in this room. We do a lot to try to reduce the printing bill, but I was inspired sufficiently by the Liberal Democrat amendment not to print it out. Councillor Young, once again, austerity was said to be about reducing debt, which has never been higher. Councillor Gallant, core spending power may have risen, inflation has risen more. I keep saying that, it keeps being true. And Councillor Young, if there's one thing I agreed with you on, it was the pronunciation of Lido. Ultimately, we spend because we have a duty to offer hope and care and a vision for the future. We spend because our vision to the people of Ealing means we know that they deserve to live and not just to survive. But I think I'd like to end by referencing the speeches of my colleagues, Councillor Hashani and Rai, who demonstrated, I think, to us, if it needed demonstrating, that a budget is not about numbers, it's about people. And that this is what we mean by community, by support, and by care. And this is why we do what we do. And this is what this budget means to the people of Ealing. And I'm proud to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Do you want to hear the other 3 Lib Dem speakers? No, I'm joking. Right. So we're going to move to amendment first. And the amendment has been moved and seconded, and therefore we'll go to the vote on the amendment first and then the motion. So first of all those in favour of the amendment? Aye. Those against? Any abstentions? Okay. For the amendment is lost. So we're going to move on now to the vote for the motion. As this is a budget motion, we will be required to undertake a recorded vote on this item. Names are here, all with pronunciations. So the Strategic Director of Resources will read out each member's name, and the Head of Democratic Services will record their vote in the minutes. And if, so do you want to start?
Councillor Shaw,
4.
Councillor Mason,
4.
Councillor Costigan,
4.
Councillor Mafus,
4.
Councillor Manro,
4.
Councillor Donnelly,
4.
Councillor Kanaljit Nagpal,
4.
Councillor Brett,
4.
Councillor Newstab,
4.
Councillor R. Wall, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Haley, Councillor Sahoto,
4.
Councillor Basutil,
Against.
Councillor Steed,
Against.
Councillor Malcolm,
Against.
Councillor Zissimos, Councillor Hirsch, Councillor Ball, Councillor Kingston,
4.
Councillor Rice, 4. Councillor Kelly,
4.
Councillor D. Martin,
4.
Councillor Johnson,
4.
Councillor J. Martin, Councillor M. Ahmed,
4.
sorry, Councillor Mahmood,
4.
Councillor S. Ahmed,
Oh.
Councillor Mohammed,
4.
Councillor L. Wall,
4.
Councillor Jammu,
4.
Councillor Iqbal,
4.
Councillor Anderson, Councillor Hashani, Councillor Gallant, Councillor Kumar, Councillor Conti, Councillor Young, Councillor Stafford, Councillor Coley, Councillor Kim Nagpal,
4.
Councillor Driscoll,
4.
Councillor P. Anand,
4.
Councillor Mohan,
4.
Councillor Dia, Councillor Raza,
4.
Councillor Jassal, 4. Councillor Nijo,
4.
Councillor Baclini,
4.
Councillor Wesson,
4.
Councillor Tighe,
4.
Councillor Summers,
4.
Councillor Mataza, Councillor Hamidi,
4.
Councillor Rai,
4.
Councillor Kwanzaa,
4.
Councillor Sharma, Councillor Mida,
4.
Councillor K. Crawford,
4.
Councillor Baines,
4.
Councillor D. Crawford, and Mr. Mayor.
What about the numbers? No. So that motion is carried. So well done, and well done to the most popular accountant in Ealing. So last two items are not long to your refreshments. Is item 11, 2024-25 pay policy statement. Are the recommendations moved?
I move the recommendations in my name.
Do we have a seconder?
So seconded.
Okay, are the recommendations agreed? Item 12, members allowance scheme, are the recommendations moved?
I move the recommendations in my name.
Seconder,
Seconded.
are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, sorry. Okay, we'll just put your hands, right, all those in favour, hands up. Okay, all those against? Okay, that's moved, that's carried, sorry. Finally, well, penultimately, item 13, motions not for debate, where you don't have any motions for debate. And item 14, there are no urgent decisions exempted from call-in since the last meeting. And therefore, the meeting is now closed.